Hello there. My name's Chris Turner. I'm the Business Development Director at Winchester Business Improvement District, and I'm also a Professor of Information Studies now at Winchester University. The survey is of 216 bids at the moment. There are 279 out there, and we managed to get data from 216 of these, mainly by questionnaires. We talked to many bid managers, we got data from their websites, we got data from their business plans, but predominantly it was by bid managers filling in surveys themselves so that the data we feel is as accurate as it can possibly be. The key figures I think are useful, but let's give a sense of what the survey is for. Bids are managed by boards, they have chairmen, they have members across the country, and one of the key tasks of the survey is to allow bids to benchmark themselves against national data sets on a whole bundle of issues about levy payments, about income, about the sort of projects that bids are doing. But also the survey allows national policymakers to have a sense of how important bids have become over the last decade and how they're now fairly important parts of the business community. So those two tasks are what the survey is all about. And I think the key findings are that there are, as we said, 279 business improvement districts. Of those, about 276 are active, and then there's a whole bundle that are less than active. They're going to vote, some are reviewing what they're doing, and some are, 33 of them in fact, are actually at the very early developmental stage. And as the survey goes into next year and the year after, it'll be possible to track through some of these bids and how they're doing. In terms of last year, 31 new bids came into being, and for many of us that's a very exciting figure, that there were 31 new cities, towns and industrial communities across the country that had the courage and the spirit really to come forward with a new business improvement district. And of those, there are still some yet to come. There were 18 renewal ballots. By that I mean these were bids that were in their second terms that were then reworking their business plans and presenting them back to their electorates, and there were 22 successful third-term ballots, bids that had gone through 10 years, and we're looking at a further 15 years. And that's quite exciting that there are bids that have now or will be able to look back to a whole 15-year life cycle, 3 5-year terms, and we'll be tracking those through over the next few years. There are only 80,000 hereditament, that's individual businesses, in a bid somewhere across the country. And 80,000 is a fairly large number. It's probably true to say, though, that most bids are of the size of 4 to 500. Of the bids we looked at, 50%, give or take, were 600 hereditament or fewer. And broadly, bids are communities of businesses that are generally accessible, small, you can walk across them, you can have a sense of the community and what they stand for. And I think that's one of the pleasures of business improvement districts, is that they are communities of businesses of all sorts that are doing things together. It's also true that over the last 5 years, the levy rate, which is the proportion of the non-domestic rate that is levied by bids to pay for services, has remained at the 1 to 1.5% level. There are a few that are higher than that and 1 or 2 lower, but on the whole, most bids are still at the 1 to 1.5%. I think the income that bids raise, which we tend to see as income, but I think we should now start seeing it as investment. This is what the businesses are spending back in their communities. And during this last year, the 15 to 16 survey, the levy income across the UK, which was then spent by businesses within their communities, was 75 million. That's over 75 million pounds. It's raised and then spent by businesses. But that's not the end of it, because it's interesting that bids then spend a fair bit of time raising money of their own. And therefore, there's another collection of funding which comes in from income generating activities, consultancy, ticket sales, events that bids do. There's a fair amount of income that comes into a community that bids were instrumental in aiding but weren't necessarily coming to their coffers. And then there's also a very large amount of pro bono, free material, support activities that BIDS raise, which when bundled together gives us a full funding picture of over £112 million across the UK that's being spent by businesses on their own communities. And that's a figure that needs to be celebrated. Here we have got businesses at this time raising money, putting their own resources into making their towns exciting, vibrant, more profitable, and bringing people in to make them the success that we think they are. BIDS, as you know, are on 5-year terms generally. At the beginning there were quite a few that weren't, but now the majority are on 5-year terms. And the majority of votes are successful. For 84% of bid levies, bid ballots, bid votes, call them what you will, were successful, and that figure of 84% is improving. In other words, every year more bids are successful. In terms of the management of BIDS and the staff that work for them, the survey suggests that there are 528 full-time and part-time staff across the BIDS sector. That's only 108 BIDS returned that data, but nonetheless there were 528. And some success with employment of apprentices. 39 BIDS employed consultants and 24 BIDS employed apprentices during the life of this particular survey. Most BIDS are staffed by fairly small teams, and therefore we're looking at 55 BIDS having fewer than 3 staff, 14 BIDS having more than 3 but fewer than 5. So the majority of BIDS are staffed by really quite small teams. A few, 14, had more staff than 10, but generally BIDS are managed by fairly small teams who work hard and deliver the objectives of their businesses. Most BIDS work closely with their local authorities. There's no denying that the local authority bid relationship is a hugely important factor in the successes of BIDS. At times that relationship is tense, at times it can be quite assertive, but broadly there has to be a communication process. And therefore most BIDS had local authority representation on their boards, 140, 18 didn't, and it'll be interesting to explore over the next year or so how many BIDS increase their local authority representation and how many stay they are. Most BIDS had 2 directors from the local authorities, generally with one as an observer and one as a fully functioning director. But the local authority role is clearly quite important in BIDS. We're also interested in the survey in property owning BIDS. Clearly at the moment property owning BIDS are small. They are predominantly in London, I think exclusively in London. But what was interesting as we explored the issue of property ownership and their relationship with BIDS is how many BIDS do have property owners on their boards, but they're not necessarily there for that very purpose. In other words, local authorities, hospitals, universities, independent businesses, some of the nationals are on boards representing their businesses. They actually happen to own the property in which they're located, and therefore they are starting to speak more articulately about the way that properties, the business rates, the relationship of property excellence and upkeep, and the rates in the local authority area, all those relationships are quite important to be teased out. We were quite interested in the survey in the way that BIDS are taking over new services, often from their local authorities, often from other organisations. At the moment, only 10, which surprised us. I thought there would be a far greater number of BIDS getting involved in transferred services, but 10 were specifically taking over activities like marketing, street cleaning, but still within that loose crime and grime agenda that local authorities were preeminent in, and the BIDS are now taking over. So issues like purple flag, street cleaning and so on are now being taken over completely by the BID on behalf of the local authority. The other thing we were interested in was neighbourhood plans. As you know, there are big issues in neighbourhood plans. They are becoming very important across the country. 200 neighbourhood planning referenda have taken place. Nearly 250,000 people have voted on planning referenda. And we were thinking that BIDS will become more involved in these. At the moment, that is slow. Only 27 BIDS out of the 122 that responded were involved in neighbourhood plans. And it's very clear this is still a very embryonic involvement. But I think there was a sense that most bids knew they needed to be involved, were starting to be, were keeping watching briefs, and were talking to those who were involved in neighbourhood plans, but none as yet are leading on the issue of neighbourhood plans, and it'll be interesting to see if that changes over time. We spent a little bit of time looking at industrial bids. As you know, these are often very different from town centre bids. They are generally more specialised, they require a very unique set of skills, and they're often quite small. So there are 17 bids picked up in this survey that were industrial. There are only, I think, 22 that we picked up completely from the survey, and their income is £3 million a year. So it's small but vital in the scheme of things. Most are quite small, but one or two are now becoming large, and there's one with nearly 400 residents in it. So there clearly is a growth in industrial bids and the role that they're playing. And I think it's quite interesting to see how that develops. The growth is very small. It's not major, but it's interesting, and the relationship of town centre bids to industrial bids is something that will be teased out in the next year or so. The bids were involved in data collection. We collected through predominantly a survey, but we also made a lot of phone calls. We talked to bid members, we looked at their data sets, we looked at their websites, and we are confident that what we've got here is a survey that reflects the industry as it is. It changes dramatically quickly. I mean, I'm amazed there were a few bids we didn't know about when we started the survey, and we've picked up the data from them now. I think the British Bids ballot watch is now getting more and more sophisticated and is allowing the data to become useful and valuable on almost a weekly basis. And next year, when we run the survey, we will clearly be using some of the data we have this year, firming some of that up, maybe not having to ask some of these slightly historical questions of bid managers, because we know the answers to some of them already, and we can then focus on some of the more specialised questions into the future. That's the survey as it is. It's quite long, it's only 30 pages. I've just picked up some interesting snapshots that emerged, and I hope you find it useful. If you look at the survey and download it from the British Bids website, by all means email me or other colleagues, and we can perhaps help more in teasing out some of the answers. And we look forward to this becoming the beginning of an even more regular cycle. We're now looking, having had 10 years of this data, we're now looking at producing some sort of decennial survey where we can look at the whole growth of the programme over the last 10 years. That's the bid programme. We're also looking at possibly at some survey that identifies and teases out the way ballots have gone. What's been the trend in ballots? Can we identify particular groups of businesses, retail, national, independent, service sector, that have become dominant forces in bids? Or has it been a highly localised thing and that the story is different in every single bid area? So thank you very much for listening to this. I hope you found it useful, and if there are comments on the survey, do please get in touch with me or any of my colleagues. Thank you very much indeed for listening.